This is the Business of Apps podcast, bringing you actionable insights from the leaders of the global app industry and the world's fastest growing apps. You can find more app news, data and analysis over at businessofapps.com.
Welcome to the Business of Apps podcast. On this show, we invite app industry professionals to cover various topics. We promise to do our best to keep it both insightful but brief. In this episode, we have Christian Eckhardt, CEO and co-founder at Customlytics. Christian, welcome to the Business of Apps podcast.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for coming on the show. Okay, let's set the stage first. If you ever had a chance to listen to a conversation of app marketers, one of the acronyms you hear a lot would be UA, or user acquisition. This topic floats in app publishers' mind pretty much from the day one when they conceive an idea for an app, and they certainly should think about it. Now, we're all familiar with this conundrum. Not enough of a choice is a problem. Too much of a choice will get you a headache as well. Today, there are lots of app marketing channels to acquire users for your mobile app. This is exactly the reason why we have Christian to give us some practical advice. But as always on this show, we're going to be talking about you, Christian, first. Tell us about yourself. How did you get involved into the app marketing field?
Absolutely. So I'm Christian. Hey, everyone. Again, thanks for having me here today. So I got involved into app marketing, I guess, around the year of 2013. So it has been like a good 7 years now. When I started as an intern at Delivery Hero here in Berlin, where we're still located with our company now. Delivery Hero is this, kind of popular, not so much startup anymore, more like a unicorn now, that does online food delivery. So you can have food delivered to your doorstep. And I was starting to work there in mobile marketing in 2013, which was kind of still the early days of mobile apps. And I don't know, instant traffic was still a thing, and I don't know, you could just launch an app and be successful with it with no marketing, just because apps are cool and you had a nice idea. So kind of not exactly how it is today. And I started to work there on the performance marketing side, actually. So I was in performance marketing. I was in charge of the performance marketing for the German brands, and I was kind of briefed with the task to go out and acquire users, so user acquisition, much as you already briefly talked about. And very quickly, I've realized that the way we were doing it back in the days was very inefficient because we had no proper data to do any proper optimization really. And then we got to this point where implementing a tracking solution for the apps was the logical thing to do, kind of, and that's what we kind of set out to do. Then once we had that in place, all of the user acquisition could run much more efficiently. We could kind of move on to the next topic, which was, now we have all those users, that's nice, but how do you retain them? So CRM was the next kind of topic to follow after that. Again, we did an assessment, went for a tool, this kind of scenario, then helped rolling it out for all the different apps in many different countries. So all in all, I think before we started the company, and by the way, my now co-founder was also working at Delivery Hero, so we've kind of worked in the same team. And I think before starting the company, how I would sum it up is that I had a good, I went through the good school of touching every aspect of mobile marketing really in Delivery Hero, which was a great place to be at the time, it still is. And then we kind of, I think 2015, 2016, we decided that, has been a good time. People started to invite us on lunches to talk about mobile app stuff. And then we thought, hey, maybe we can get work a bit on the monetization to get more than lunches out of it. That's when we started the company. And we're still small, 20 people, still based here in Berlin, and built everything up from the ground, no investors or anything. And we are also with Customlytics now, we're also kind of staying true to the core of what we want to do, which is a mobile marketing infrastructure, strategy, campaign management, or everything that's related to making a mobile app successful, really.
I see. So you have a pretty, the notion of user acquisition is really close to you because you've been doing this thing for years. Okay, so let's lay out the kind of a broad picture of what major user acquisition channels are out there for app marketers and developers to use.
So essentially how the mobile advertising industry looks like today is essentially that all of the places where you can generate users, which is the is the definition of user acquisition. All of these are more or less popular apps that run advertising in their app. So this is kind of the bigger theme. Of course, there's also the mobile web part where the same thing happens, but it's on a mobile website. That also exists. But I think bottom line, the message is that you have to be where the attention of the user is, as in you have to be in other apps or on mobile websites where a user spends time, so that they can consume whatever advertising is showing them. So this is kind of a basic common ground for our discussion. And then, well, the major channels are kind of deriving from that exact question of where are users spending time. So the major user acquisition channels for a mobile app are the big apps where users are spending time, namely Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, all of those kind of companies. And, the more users they have, the more kind of, there's this interesting concept of like user attention measured in like time spent in an app. So the apps that have the most time spent in them, those are the ones that are the major channels, in other words. So yeah, broad picture is essentially it's the big social networks that I already told. Of course, there's also search, which is huge still, of course. So they are primarily talking Google. And then there is, I think, as a third meta category, I would say there is everything that is, well, it's essentially apps that are not as big as a Facebook, so they don't really market their inventory, or like they don't have the resources to market the inventory directly like Facebook does. So this is the area where, if you're an app developer and you want to monetize via ads, what you put inside of your app is essentially typically one of those mediation SDKs, which has essentially connections to all the big ad exchanges, and that inventory ends up in the what I would call the programmatic space. And in the programmatic space, essentially, as the name already implies, you bidding on a certain impression in typically an app that is smaller than, Facebook. And yeah, there's a couple of players involved there. Google also being pretty big with their what was called AdMob previously. So yeah, this is, I think, the greater landscape.
So kind of three big buckets: social, search, and the rest, networks, programmatic advertising. Do you think the influencers as the marketing channel kind of a good addition to the mix? Because I know many app developers, particularly big powerhouses, are in touch with influencers when they need to get a boost on the marketing app for the app brand, to get a recognition, to get attraction. What do you think?
No, absolutely. For me, this is part of like social media. So when I know I only kind of talked about ads on Facebook, but then when we're talking about paid social, influencers are definitely an important factor in this, heavily depending on the product, of course. But yes, of course, it's another form of advertising, so to say, on the big major social networks, which can be like very legitimate for your UA strategy. Of course, tracking is always a bit funny with that. So of course, we also have a lot of clients that are engaging in activities like this. Also always the question like, hey, how can you measure this? Can we make sure that people click on this tracking link if we can even put it, stuff like this. So that's a bit more complicated, but there's like genuine reason why they can, like why influencers charge like quite good amounts for their placements for sure.
Right. Now, obviously there's a notion of a life cycle for an app. When you're launching an app on the App Store and like an initial takeoff, there's a certain sense what kind of channels you're using in this stage. And then this is a kind of a marathon you're running. As you need to grow your user base, you start adding other channels. And then at some point you have to think about like, okay, what's the strategy to adding even more channels when you see that the previous ones are depleting? So what channels would you suggest to use in different stages of apps lifecycle?
A very solid question. Also one that we get asked very frequently in client talks and like workshops when we talk about a good marketing strategy for mobile app. So the generic answer to that is that you should be starting with the mainstream channels. And when I say mainstream channels, I mean the channels that have the biggest reach, the biggest amount of inventory. They will have access to, when you compare the different user acquisition channels that we've also talked about already, and like the paid social, which consists of bigger social networks and smaller social networks, what you will always see is that the more users that those guys have in their apps, the more ad inventory, of course, they can sell. And our suggestion when you are starting off with an app, and especially in that critical kind of first phase where it's really like, you starting from 0 monthly active users, 0 MAU, this is the point where we would always say, yep, start with the mainstream channels. The mainstream channels are Google, Facebook, Apple search ads, which I did mention before, but also, of course, important when you talk search. And then from there, kind of work your way down the ladder of, major channels. So, after Facebook, you maybe start with Facebook kind of including Instagram. You start with this, you move on to the smaller and smaller social providers, for example. So this is what we would always recommend. The reason for this is that because they have the biggest audience size, especially with a new brand, that's why I'm saying when you're starting from 0 MAU, especially with a new brand, the first users that you're getting will be super cheap because they don't know the brand. They have access to a huge inventory. Many users are in there. Also, they have the biggest variety in users that you can get. So all in all, what you will see is that those channels will be cheaper on a cost per install, but also cost per action typically view than the more niche ones. And that's essentially what I'm saying is start with the mainstream ones and then work your way down to the more niche ones. That can make a lot of sense if the target group is matching with the target group of your business. So for example, TikTok, we all know, a very young audience group. If that is exactly what you're looking for, or like if that's exactly the target group of your business, well, awesome. Then that's a clear indication to maybe do that a bit earlier than you would in the traditional scenario. But generally speaking, it's start with the big channels and then move your way down to the smaller ones. Also, because what would happen is that if your media budget grows, and you start putting more money into the mainstream channels, what will happen is that there's just saturation going on. And once you reach a point where you spend significant amounts, also it will get more expensive. So that's the point where then it becomes like for the first time, even interesting to look at other channels that will be more expensive from the beginning. But since you have now scaled Google and Facebook already to a point where it has become more expensive on a cost per install, cost per action basis, then is the point to look into other channels. So this is kind of, I think, top level, what we would always say.
All right. Now we're talking about user acquisition, and obviously such notions as optimization and KPIs or key performance indicators are essential notions that you have to focus on. If you want to execute your user acquisition strategy efficiently, you need to optimize. You need to iterate with the kind of creatives you're using different channels, measuring data you're acquiring to plan your actions down the road. So what strategies should app marketers execute to optimize their UA campaign, and any KPIs to be focused on? And finally, perhaps you can lay on the table some kind of short list of mistakes people do when it comes to optimizing their UI campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think just the set of KPIs is probably not the so exciting part, because that's pretty, online marketing has been going on for very long already. And some KPIs, of course, have changed due to the fact that now we are talking about mobile apps. But in general, I think the KPIs are pretty much common sense. So when we start with the metrics in paid advertising, the first thing you have is the impression. A small subset of users will make it from the impression to actually clicking on your ad. Another small subset of those users that click the ad will make it to actually installing the app. Like all of them will land in the App Store, but not all of them will install the app. This is the part where you can help with App Store optimization a bit. And then even less people will then end up using the app, and even less people will end up doing whatever conversion goal that you have. So this is kind of the value chain of online marketing, really. And I guess the KPIs that we're looking at are, as I said, it's pretty much common sense by now. You look at the conversion rates between different things. So the first conversion rate is the one from impression to click. That's a click-through rate. The next one is the one from click to install. That's, I think, just generally called the click to install conversion rate. And then you have another conversion rate that's from install to whatever purchase you might have, or just usage of the app. I think there's not, no big revelations on that. I think what's kind of more interesting, or because you were asking for also for a bit common mistakes, what's more interesting here to understand is what is actually influencing all those different metrics or KPIs, where actually every of these KPIs has different things that can influence them. In a lot of cases, it's also cross-influencing. So you do one thing, it helps with one KPI, but it's worsening the other. So to give you an example that's maybe helpful. So, for example, the
Sure.
first conversion rate, the one from impression to click, also called the click-through rate. This conversion rate is, well, essentially only really kind of dependent on the attractivity of your ad, so your creative. If it's a very attractive creative, if it's very like interesting for users, they will click on it. So that's a KPI that you can essentially influence by having better creatives. If we think about the next step, the one after, you've got them to click, but then they land in the App Store, this part is not so much relating to the ad creative anymore. A small portion of it is because a user would expect something that's kind of in line with what he or she saw in the ad. But there, the biggest lever really is App Store optimization, where you optimize the appearance of your app in the store so that you minimize the kind of the friction, the loss of users that land on your App Store page to users that are actually installing. So very different thing to do. Like App Store optimization is kind of the main part. And when I say App Store optimization, then I primarily mean the visual stuff, because only the visual stuff will have a big impact on the conversion rate in the store. And then later on, the conversion rate from a user that has installed the app to a user actually making a purchase is again dependent on very different things. This is then very dependent on the product. Is the product working well? How is the user experience in the app? This kind of things. So what I'm saying essentially is that I think the revelation here is that you have to understand that depending on the setup of your company, you will only have influence on, a few of the KPIs or metrics, and you should understand how they kind of, what is actually driving them, what you have to change to increase this or that metric. This is, I guess, my top-level answer to this.
Right. So when you're planning your app user acquisition campaign, you have to think through what actually is going on when somebody's picking up the phone, opening an app, see an ad for your application, clicking on it, and like each stage of this journey from the actually just seeing your ad to fulfilling any particular action inside of your app, what's going on each of those stages and how you can influence the situation to convert that specific app user, that person who clicked the ad, to become your user and hopefully a loyal user. All right. So obviously at some point you may see that the numbers you're getting from the channels you're using, the number of downloads you're getting, their quality, I mean, how loyal these people were, you measure retention, and you see that there's a need to add one more channel or more. So how should I vet properly this new channel to make sure I'm not going to be spending my budget that is not that big anyway, and I need to be very careful with spending every dollar or cent or euro I'm spending on it. So how do I vet properly a new channel?
Yeah, actually, I guess a pretty tough one. Well, I think it starts with a really in-depth assessment of whatever channel you're looking into adding to your mix. As in, you go there and you look at, okay, what are the users that are using this particular, where's the traffic coming from? What are users? If it's TikTok, which users are using TikTok? Understand this part. Then the second thing, kind of understand what creative options I have, especially the major, the mainstream major channels that we've discussed before, Facebook, Instagram, Google. They offer plenty of room for different creatives, and it's always kind of for me sad to see when I see companies that are spending significant amounts in UA, and then they have this one banner set in 3 sizes that they just uploaded to Google, Facebook, and to other channels. Completely ignoring that there is custom possibilities with each channel for creatives. So that's the second thing I think to really understand. And then the third one is probably to, make sure that the tracking and everything works. Look into how you are measuring the new channel, what has to be set up there. If we're talking mobile apps, then you probably are using one of the MMPs, the mobile measurement partners, to set up the connection to whatever channel it is. Or if there is no connection, use the regular tracking links. And then, start with a smallish budget. Then day to day, try to optimize it. And I think depending on the performance that you see there, that will give you an answer to kind of, how to proceed and what to do next. And I guess what we would always recommend doing then is, after some time has passed, do an analysis that we always call I think influencer report is probably the right name for it. It's not related to social media influencers. It's related to how many touch points with other channels have there been before I had the last touch point with whatever channel I'm using now, that actually got the attribution and led to the install. Because what we on mobile devices, same as like with outdoor advertising, we are living in a crazy world with hundreds, thousands of ads being at least shown to us. Not all of them we can consume, but at least shown to us on a daily basis. So in almost all of those analyses that we do, we see that there's many touch points before a user finally converts with some kind of last click attribution model, where the last click then kind of gets the attribution, but there's been like 5 other touch points before. And this is a healthy exercise to look at for any new channel that you add, to understand if this is actually giving you incremental users, so users that don't have that many touch points before, so that are actually generally installing your app because of that channel, or if it's a channel that has very high amount of installs that were having other touch points before with other channels. Because there you can already be sure that where at least the awareness part, the part where a user is like, oh, well, this product exists, was not done by the channel that you're testing, which is typically getting the full last click attribution. So this is, I think, a healthy exercise to do.
All right, so attribution is essential, and start small and be cautious. Just do testing, make sure that it's actually working, and it's working as it intended to be. You mentioned TikTok briefly, so I guess none of the conversation about marketing these days can be completed without mentioning TikTok. So it's a superstar as a platform, as an advertising platform. So what are your thoughts on how brands should launch ad campaigns on this new platform? And how's it different from Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat in terms of running ad campaigns?
It's very interesting. I think prime example of TikTok is a prime example of why it's so interesting and kind of exciting to work in this mobile industry, even after 10 plus years after the launch of the app stores, because stuff like this just comes up and it changes kind of parts of the game at least. So TikTok is very interesting. As you've already said, it's kind of a new channel that's a bit kind of on the rise. I think we're really also raising the question because very recently they have launched for the first time ever their self-serve advertising platform, which is yet again changing everything. This is how a small niche channel where only agencies can book in stuff with faxing over an IO for a certain amount of impressions, and then kind of this transition to being self-serve, being like the Facebooks and Googles and Twitters. This is the big step towards becoming a mainstream channel even. So very, very interesting to see. We are having actually a few customers lined up now where we're just about to start the first campaigns there. TikTok has already been big on the influencer side and on the the side where for some brands it already it always already made sense to have a TikTok presence. Not talking ads, more talking having a page there or a profile there. But now everything is changing because they are indeed launching paid ads via the self-serve platform, which again was not available before. So yeah, very interesting stuff. I think to answer the question of how is it different to the mainstream channels is that, well, it has an even younger target group. So if we are talking teenagers, then this is the place to be. And if that's in line with what you want to achieve as a brand, then TikTok is the way to go. It's from the big social media platforms, it's the one with the youngest demographic for sure. I guess probably the next higher up would then be Snapchat, and the one above that probably Instagram, and then above that probably Twitter, and above that probably Facebook. Where Facebook is already the pretty old people. So yeah, this is exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how TikTok is striving as a advertising platform. And I hope that they don't get into more politically motivated trouble. So yeah, let's see.
All right, we'll definitely see. Now we're in this section of the show when I'm asking a few quick questions to my guests to paint a better picture of who they are. So here are the questions. Are you iOS or Android person?
iOS.
All right. One more iOS person on the show. What was your first mobile phone?
Oh, definitely Alcatel. It was very strangely looking. It had a black and white display, very low resolution. One of the early Alcatel models, really, far away from, that was probably in maybe it was already 2000, I guess. So yeah, long time ago, some Alcatel. I could figure out the type.
All right. What is your favorite app now?
The thing is, well, realistically, it's one of the messaging apps, probably WhatsApp, because it's just so useful, and it's it has kind of become so much of a standard to use if you want to communicate with people outside of iOS. But it's kind of boring. So let me actually open up my phone. Probably from a usability perspective or like a business model that's kind of digital now, that was very analog. I would say it's Park Now, which is if you're parking your car somewhere on the street and the city is charging for the parking. Then in the good old days, you had to go to some machine, have cash with you, or like coins even, to get a parking ticket. And you can do it with an app now. There's plenty of them around. It's also not a new concept. But for somebody that's still kind of into driving by car, even in Berlin, that's pretty useful. So Park Now.
All right. Any app technologies that are waiting for? So something on the horizon you're waiting for your the apps on your phone to become more useful? What are you waiting for in terms of app technologies?
I think the biggest technological change, because I do really believe that it's changing the mechanics of how apps are distributed, which, by the way, is super old-fashioned. It's like, some monopolistic store that you have to go to, and then you have to download a package, and it takes some time, depending on your network connection. So that's all very old-fashioned. So the technology that I'm looking forward to most is, and both Apple and Google are working on this, is this notion of, well, I think Google is calling it app streaming on iOS. It will be those app clips, I think, as they will call them with iOS 14. So the general notion of having either the entire app or parts of the app available without downloading it the old way from the App Store is what kind of gets me excited, because again, I think this is going to blur the line a lot between good mobile web experiences, which already do exist, and app experiences to a point where maybe at some point we'll be sitting there and we will not even, or like the general user will not even be able to tell the difference anymore. And this is, I think, an exciting change.
All right, great. That was actually my last question. But before I let you go, how can people know more about what you do?
I think the best way to kind of learn more about what we do and also actually get a great introduction about many, many topics in mobile marketing is by moving over to our website, which is Customlytics.com. And then in the top right corner, there's a little button that's called the Mobile Developer Guide. And the Mobile Developer Guide is a little book that we wrote not so long ago together with a befriended app development company that has, again, great content on a lot of topics around mobile marketing, including app store optimization, tracking, user acquisition, retargeting, CRM, all of that. It's free. You can download a PDF version, or if you fancy and you don't live at the end of the world, we will also send you a physical copy for free. I think that's a great read. It's free. It's a nice little community project that we did, and I think that's probably the best way to learn more about what we do.
Sounds awesome. Great. So thanks a lot for your time and coming on our podcast, Christian. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye. And that was Christian Eckhardt, CEO and co-founder at Customlytics. To listen to more episodes, subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and Stitcher. Just search for Business of Apps and you will find us easily. Once you subscribe, you will be able to get new episodes in your smartphone, tablet, and computer as soon as we release them. And please don't forget to leave us a review and comment. It is highly appreciated. And all episodes will also be available on businessofapps.com. See you next week. Bye.
This is the Business of Apps podcast, bringing you actionable insights from the leaders of the global app industry and the world's fastest growing apps. You can find more app news, data, and analysis over at businessofapps.com. Thank you for listening to the Business of Apps podcast. For more, head on over to businessofapps.com.